Hey everyone, I'm Ginny Robertson, founder of the On Purpose Woman Global Community and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. I'm so excited to be here with the amazing Sofia Wren Nitchie to talk about her powerful article in the March-April issue of On Purpose Woman called Making Faster Progress Without Burnout. If you'd ever felt like you're doing all the things but not really getting anywhere, or you've hit that dreaded wall of burnout, you're going to love this conversation. We're diving into what real progress looks like, how to ditch the busy work, and how to create more space, joy, and impact in your life and business. And we're going to do that in less than 30 minutes, right? We're
Right.
going to deliver a lot today, Sophia. Thanks for being here with
Yes.
me.
Thanks for having me.
I love this. I love all of your articles. You always come from you bring a different perspective, I think, to business topics because you typically write about business topics, but you write about them in a very personal way and applicable way and relatable way. And so before we dive into this interview, what do you want our viewers to know about you?
Sure. So I come from a family of small business owners, and I've run my own business now for over 10 years. And for 25 years, I've been writing and publishing online. So in my business, I was able to bring my skills of writing to help other people to write their books, to help them to edit them, to go from idea to final product, but also to help them with their business marketing if they need to write for their sales page or their emails or all the things. Um, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can use writing, and I just wanted to bring some of the things that I've learned in my work. Um, to the table in case anybody else is maybe a newer entrepreneur or they're finding themselves burned out. And even if you weren't an entrepreneur, you could probably use some of these tips as well.
Oh, I think so, for sure. Well, let's start with your story. What inspired you to write this article, and what was happening in your life when you realized you needed to redefine what progress looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been ongoing, especially when you don't have somebody else kind of watching over your schedule, and you have some maneuver room to decide how you're going to use your time, then it really becomes important. Basically, how you're managing yourself. So for me, especially when I started my business, I was very much like off to the races, just sort of putting everything I had at it, because I really wanted it to be successful. I really wanted it to be successful quickly. So I figured, the more energy you put into it in the beginning, the more quickly you're going to get to the finish line. Um, but that's where, after a year or two, I just wasn't seeing the results from all of that work. And luckily, I started to kind of question rather than just continue to do what I was doing, I started to question things. And that's where I started to learn some newer ways to think about how I was spending my time so that I could actually get my result out of it that I wanted. And also, it turned out not feel as burned out too, because, our personal lives are also really important.
Yeah, and like you said a little while ago, I think we can use these tips and your article, the information in your article for all aspects of our life because we've got to merge all those things together. And
Yeah.
we can easily get burned out with all the responsibilities we have in our personal lives as well.
Hmm.
You introduced this idea of false urgency, which I just love, and I think so many of us can fall into. Can you talk about what that means and how did it affect your business early on?
Right. So, in terms of what gets you motivated to go up and do something, we all have our own things that we respond to, or even ways that we use on ourselves to get us going. So if you're somebody who, maybe in school, if you were in school, maybe you were up at 2 a.m. finishing a paper right before the deadline. And it's that
Guilty.
urgency. Yeah, me too. It's that urgency can really light a fire under your bum to get you moving. And 2 weeks before the deadline, you're not really in any hurry, so you don't feel the burn. You don't feel the urge to work on it until the last minute. It provides a natural kind of motivator for you with urgency. So in that case, that's not fake urgency because there is a real deadline. Fake urgency is when there is no real external urgency. Like it's not real. And we can perceive it to be real, or we can make it up in our own head, or even somebody else can be telling you it's urgent, but like if you were to go back to them and say, hey, actually, something's come up, would it be okay if you gave me another week to do this? Or even just setting the boundary if you're able to, if you do have some control to say, I'm really sorry, but this is the way it is that I'm going to need another week to get back to you. It's not a question. And you can do that, especially if you have clients or something where you kind of are more in the power seat of, but even then you can feel like, oh, I'm not allowed to. So some of it is kind of looking at what's real, what's not real, and what am I creating for myself, as a trick to motivate myself, or because I'm feeling obligated to please somebody else and kind of fit into this tiny box. Um, so there's a lot of different things that can fall under the umbrella of fake urgency, but that's the short answer.
You just brought up a question I have now, and I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of this before. You talked about the real urgency when we procrastinate on something. And I remember so clearly doing a term paper. I'd had 6 weeks to do it. It was the day before it was due, and I'm in the library hoping I can get it done before they close. And this is well before there's no internet, it was books and
Mm,
microfiche. And I remember writing this paper and doing this research and thinking, wow, this is a really interesting topic. If I had started earlier, I would have actually enjoyed it, I think. And now I'm just kind of like, I know do okay on it, but it wasn't an enjoyable process. And I realized I was pretty addicted to that urgency. So do you think we sometimes create the false urgency, like we create the real urgency to get that motivation to get and it really is a false
yeah.
sense of I used to tell people all the time, oh, I work so much better under pressure. That's not true for anyone. I don't think it's
Mm,
damaging for us to do that a lot. And what
yeah.
I was doing is I was justifying how I worked. Oh, I'm always
Hmm.
working under pressure, so therefore I must work well under pressure. So do you think that we sometimes create both of those
I
and
think
that
so.
can lead to even more burnout?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we do have a lot of times we do have choices that we can make, even
Mhm.
if it's a real deadline that we didn't set for ourselves, like, choosing not to work on it when it's coming.
Yeah,
That is a choice. We might not consciously be making the choice, but doing nothing is a choice. Um,
it is.
so we do, we are part of the process of creating some of this, and I do think that we get hooked on it as a method because it works. It works for us. It worked in the past.
Mhm.
But like you said, if you're gonna burn your system out because like we can't live in fear and panic all the time. And that's basically what we're doing. And that's where people get burned out when they rely on that. Okay, once a year, maybe that's fine. And there's not gonna be any serious repercussions. But um the more you do it, the more you're gonna start to see that, yeah, I could have enjoyed this. This could have been nice. We could have, had nice things, but we didn't. We could have had a cup of coffee. We could have gone to a cafe. We could have like stopped at the library and looked around at some books that looked fun to read as a sidebar and then gone back and had breaks and had naps and had, you know, partners to work with and throw ideas around. And we could have had so many different things
Yeah.
that it could have been spaced out. Maybe I would have had more time to like ponder it in the shower or what, there's so many things that could have been a part of our process when we don't do that, when we're not in the urgency headspace, because it really does like narrows our focus and it kind of turns off a lot of parts of our brain to
Mm.
be in panic mode. So there's so many things we're saying no to that again we might have gotten in the habit and this was never a conscious choice, but we can see it. And and sometimes you have to, I think one of the most common ways that we create it for ourselves is just by the act of taking on too much, you
Mhm.
know, by just like promising too much to too many people. And then it's like kind of becomes your default choice because you have so many fires you need to put out all the time that there isn't the space to do it earlier.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So by being a little bit more reflective of like, okay, how much can I really do in this amount of time to have the quality of life that I want to have? And that might mean saying no to a few things and disappointing a few people potentially, or making some hard decisions between things to honor what I really prefer. I would say that's probably like the most common thing. And I know it's something that I fall into. And that's why I think taking some time to kind of reflect on the whole picture of things every so often will really serve you in being able to see like what patterns have I fallen into by default? Okay, that's fine. Let's just dust ourselves off and like reorient and try something different for the future. And it can be hard if you've gotten into a pattern of I'm relying on that urgency feeling to get motivated. There can be kind of like a in between time, a transition time where you haven't found like your positive motivator yet. But you did mention one of them when you're talking about the paper, because like curiosity, for instance, can be really motivating, something like that, like just some pure, wonderful interest and curiosity into something could be a motivator. And that's a very different feeling than gotta do it, gotta do it. Oh my God, oh my God. That's more like, oh, this is cool. Wonder what's on the next page.
Yeah.
So it'll be a transition it'll be a transition to change. But it's something I think we can do.
I do too, and I've managed to do that a lot over my life. And I think what also worked for me was to start to look at what I was getting out of the busy, what I was getting out of the last minute. There's a payoff for it. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's just that rush, that adrenaline, and patting myself on the back, I pulled it off again, right? And then other
Right.
people are going,
Right.
wow, you got that, giving all kinds of accolades for being overworked and overstimulated, right? And so,
That's true.
I do workshops on procrastination, and one of the things we talk about is that until that payoff for doing that sort of more destructive behavior is not as big, until the payoff for, let me get it right, until the payoff that we get is the positive payoff is greater than the payoff we feel like we're getting for the destructive behavior. We won't change anything. So, we have to start to recognize, like you said, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go into this leisurely, like to actually have a plan, to actually spell it, day by day a little bit, to do, to actually ease into it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that we all have our different things that we get out of the scenarios that we're stuck in. And so
Hmm.
yeah, being honest with yourself. Like for instance, like if I'm helping a lot of people, then that's I'm making a big difference. I'm important in a way.
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
me to say like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Could you ask somebody else to? Is kind of taking something away. Um,
Hmm.
and like letting go of control in that
And the
way.
ego gets involved a little bit too,
My
doesn't it?
ego, yes.
Not your
Yes.
ego,
But
our egos.
yeah,
Yeah.
we all have one, yeah. And it's like, and I think it's also part of the kind of you know, how we perceive how valuable things are. Because something I really
Mm,
looked at is like, how much value do I put on like someone else being like, oh, thank you. Wow, thanks. Wow, that's so great. You got all this done. How much value do I put on someone else saying that for the things that they see and that they value
mhm.
versus me being like, wow, yeah, I had time to like do my coloring or whatever I value and that only matters to me. Like, do I automatically put that as like second wrong, third wrong, fourth wrong? Like, do I value the things that no one else cares about but me? And kind of looking at that because I think that for me, that's played a big role is just like I wasn't really validated for any of that kind of stuff ever.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it and kind of making your kind of reworking how it's almost like a currency, like a joy currency.
Oh,
And
I
kind
like
of
that.
finding, yeah, like finding your own personal value system and like how many joy tokens does something give you and like are you accounting for that?
Yeah. Well, a big takeaway from your article is that busyness doesn't equal progress. And I love that
Yeah.
statement so much. So, what are some signs that someone might be caught in just the busyness and they're not making, because, it's like, well, I'm busy, so I must be doing something right. I'm working all the time, so I must be making progress, but then don't want to look at the bottom line to see if I'm actually making any money, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with that narrowing of the focus that happens when we're hustling and urgent, because it makes it harder to look around and see what the results are, because that would require you to kind of slow down for a minute and not be in it. And business owners, we have the saying of like working in the business versus working on the business. Like there's this distinction between I'm answering emails and answering phone calls and ticking off tasks, like just being like almost like an employee of your business versus being working on it. You're taking a step back, you're being more like a CEO, someone who's looking at everything and then making big decisions like, okay, we're going to pull this whole department and they're now going to do all of this instead. We're going to change this, change that. And you have to get an entirely different headspace to do that. That's why they're usually two jobs. But if you're a small business owner, you got to do both. And same thing if you work from home or something like that, then you both need to do your job, but also look at the way everything works, from more of a manager point of view and manage yourself. Um, and so what was the question? What were we talking about? We were talking about how do you know if you're too busy?
Busyness doesn't equal progress. How do we know that we're caught in this busy work? I mean, because there's a rush
Right.
there too. There's a payoff for busy work, especially if
Yeah.
we're avoiding something or we don't know how to do something. Oh, go untangle the paper clips for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you have to do something really hard and really not intuitive, especially if you're feeling anxious about the time you have left to get something done, is you need to step out of it. You need to like go for a walk, go get a cup of tea, like take some breaths and like calm yourself down so that you can try to distinguish between like what is real and what is not, and not get so wrapped up in it that you can't see beyond your blinders. And the only way to do that is just to take a step back, and you could even maybe get somebody to help you to talk about it from another way that you hadn't thought about. I really like to journal. I have questions that I ask myself on a regular basis to kind of get my mind moving in the right places to make sure I'm not forgetting about something important. Um, and you need to kind of get outside the problem. Just like Einstein says something about that, like you can't solve the problem with the thinking that created the problem. You have to step out of it. So that's what you have to do, and it can feel really wrong. It can feel really like, what on earth? Why would I ever slow down when I have no time? That doesn't make any sense at all. But if you did slow down and you thought of a better way to do it, then you could save yourselves hours and hours and hours and have time to put your feet up. You get it done and have time to put your feet up. That's what is available. Um, but you're not going to have your best ideas if you're like in a knot of feeling like it's all urgent and I've got to do it. I mean, if your daughter's in the hospital and you got to run there, that's real urgency. But there's a lot of things that are not on that level that we make into that level mentally. So if you can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, get away from it, have a breather, and start to try to be on the outside of it. And if you can clear out half an hour or an hour to like I said, maybe have a conversation with somebody or do some reflective journal exercises, something like that, to really do like a more deeper dive. If you could fit that into your schedule, like at least every 2 weeks, if not more, to be able to do that, then you would really be able to see the trajectory of what you're doing. And that's what you need to do, because if you haven't made progress in 2 weeks, then the question is, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
If you have notes on this is what I want to do, and then you check, okay, I'm not there yet. Am I closer to it? Am I farther away? What was I doing? Okay, what should I have been doing instead? And that's the only way I know how to do it, is just to take some reflective time and then to kind of assess, where did I say I wanted to go? Because we usually forget at some point. And then, am I closer? no, why is that? What was I doing instead? What should I do next time? And then just kind of like bit by bit work my way there. And then that's easier because it's like you don't need to know all the answers about next year, but you do need to know what to do right now. So I find that that's like a good happy medium between like being urgent so much you're kind of blind and being so unable to like plan out every detail of the world because we don't have that much certainty on things.
And years ago, decades ago, Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Are you familiar with that book?
I've heard of it. I don't remember if I read all of it, but I've definitely read part of it.
Yeah, he talked about these four quadrants, and I don't remember the exact wording on them, but one quadrant is important, not urgent,
Yes,
and
yes.
urgent, not important. Sometimes, we get to things that are urgent, but they really weren't important to start with, but now we didn't make them important. Now they're urgent. So his advice that we always try to stay in the important column and handle things before they become urgent. And then
Yeah.
there are things that are just not urgent or important, and we should not give a
Yeah.
whole lot of attention to any of those. So, it's a little bit about like what you're talking about, but it's just recognizing, you know, and sometimes it's just comfortable to do the stuff that we know how to do and the busy work and the tidying up and I need to clean off
Exactly.
my desk. And, that's important stuff. But we also have to look at what we're avoiding. What are we avoiding and how
Yeah,
can we
right.
get
Because
past
all
that?
that you can kind of have something the biggest things in life, right, are going to involve the risk of us getting it wrong
Yeah.
or not knowing exactly what we're doing because it's on our growing edge. We're growing into somebody that's able to do those things, but we're not that person quite yet, you know, and to get there, you might make a mistake. And so that's one of the reasons why our mind will get us to do the easy stuff like washing the dishes or
Yeah.
whatever. And we feel kind of accomplished, but we didn't really do the thing that we're here to do today. And so I kind of think of it as like X marks the spot of the treasure map. Like you can dig all the way around, but if you didn't hit the spot, then you didn't hit it.
Yeah.
Um, and so like it's important to kind of forgive yourself, but that's why I kind of like the approach of pursuing progress and being mindful to again think holistically about our life because that's where it gets blurry the difference because like if you're not taking time to take care of yourself it's going to be harder for you to metal up the courage to go do the big scary thing at work,
Yeah.
so the giving yourself more of space to maybe let the dishes sit in the sink, if you need a little bit of a break, maybe that's not that important right now. um to find a way to avoid burnout has the additional, not only is that good as human beings, we don't want to be burned out, but it gives you more energy to actually move the needle and the things that are going to make the difference because they do take more out of us. They're also more fulfilling in the end, and
Yeah.
the rewards of them are usually a lot greater. So it's the energy is going to pay back, but to kind of give yourself a little bit of a break, that to know that like if I'm coming up with excuses, maybe it's because I need something, you know? And rather than frittering away my energy doing busy work, why don't I just try to like really fill my well up, you know? And my mind might be screaming at me like, what? Brunch with your best friend doesn't seem very productive, but that's what I need. And then I'm gonna feel more like plumped up, full of energy. And then like, okay, afternoon now, we're doing this scary thing where we said we were gonna do, we're working on that proposal to send to someone or whatever it was. And now we're ready. Now we're really don't have an excuse because we just went and we did some self-care stuff. We're ready now. And so like that's always a good tactic to try too if you find that you're having trouble getting to where you really need to go.
And
And
in those
consider that
moments,
part of the process, like honor that
yeah,
that self-care, it's not just a distraction. It's part of the
right. Yeah, it's not a one and done. Yeah. You mentioned something also in your article about these idea generating moments where, in the shower, I get them in the shower in my car driving. But
Yeah.
if we're all stressed out and empty, we can't even get that. We can't even have those moments. And that's where some of our best stuff comes in and some of the best stuff that might help us do what we're trying to do, right? So say a little bit more about these
Yeah.
idea
Yeah,
generating
it's
moments and how
interesting
we
because
access.
when you're really burned out, then the things that would normally be like creative idea generators feel more like work. Like we get to
Hmm.
a certain bottom level of burnout where everything is now draining. The stuff that before would give you energy is now work, you know?
Oh, not another idea, right? That sort of like,
Well, now it's
yeah.
just another thing to add to the pile. Like it's
Uh-huh. Yeah.
depressing,
Yeah.
Like suddenly taking a shower feels like I don't want to get up. I don't want to get up. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want, and that's like a sign like you really like it's gonna take some time to like get out of the negative.
Mhm.
But then once you're in like a normal equilibrium, then it should work the way that it usually does, where yeah, taking a shower, painting or coloring or doing something with a little kid or going on a walk, wandering around by some flowers, all of these things, going to the library, all these things could be a time where it feels juicier and it feels like you're in flow or you're able to both feel joyful and creative. And yeah, you might just get those miraculous ideas that you got to pull a notebook and write down right now because they're brilliant. So I think that we need to have space for those things. And we definitely need to prevent ourselves from getting so burned out that we lose the easy access to them because everything is suddenly work. So it's really important. Burnout can take months to get out of. So we definitely don't want to get all the way to burnout. But hopefully, those watching are more in an equilibrium state, in which case, you know, we don't need to get all the way to the end to know that it's important to fit in, because if you do fit it in, you're gonna get more instant fulfillment of ideas and feeling joy and filling your tank, and you're gonna be more bouncy and
Ooh,
bouncing up. And then hopefully it just creates that positive reinforcement. Again, finding different ways to motivate ourselves that are more positive. And then it will, again, you see it as part of the creative process and part of the process of actually being productive and not a distraction and not a what are you doing? You're goofing off. They can all tie together.
yeah, it does. For someone watching right now who's maybe on the edge of burnout or just feeling stuck, what's one shift? What's one thing they could do today or one way they could shift today to move forward with more clarity and ease, or grace and ease are my two favorite ways of being in the world. What do you say?
Yeah, I think when in doubt, one of my favorite tools is to write a letter to yourself, or if you're not a writer, you could try recording a little note to yourself,
Hmm.
like a little talk, you know? Like if you were your best friend, like what would you say to yourself? You could record yourself a little pep talk and then listen to it again, maybe a couple times until you can really hear the love and feel the love. And similarly, in writing, you can write yourself a pep talk, or you can just write all of your worries and troubles and anxieties and feelings and stuff like that. And then, ask yourself, like, what am I really needing? If there was a benevolent version of myself to come save me right now, like what would she say? What would she recommend I go do? And then just really try to go do that. So when in doubt, that's what I come to. Just like a simple letter of like, dear Sophia, how are you feeling right now? This is the deal. Okay, I think you need to do this. And then just one step at a time, just do that, because I think
It's like a
into
permission slip, isn't it? It's like a,
it is, it's a permission slip if you need to put your feet up. But if there is something that you're just kind of wishy-washy avoiding, I think in your gut you'll know. Um,
hmm.
if it's time to like just get it out of the way. But probably you're gonna tell yourself to, yeah, do something to fill your tank. And then just like really, yeah, take the permission slip and really take it. Because like I said, it might feel like the most not intuitive, smart thing to go on a walk right now. But I was in those shoes where, yeah, I was putting all this time into my business, doing who knows what, and not getting results out of it. And I wrote a letter to my business and it said, you should go for a walk, Sophia. You should go for a walk. And I was like, what? That's not a productive business activity. And it turns out it was. It turns out that was exactly what I needed because I was wasting a ton of time doing what I was doing. And I just needed to stop. I just needed to get away, get into a new headspace, and get out of the cycle. So yeah, so I think that's a great tool. Just writing a letter or recording a little pep talk to yourself and listening to it or rereading it.
I love that. Thank you for that. You
Yeah.
have anything coming up you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I'm doing something new where I'm offering free co-work sessions live with me. So I have one next Wednesday. I think it's the 16th of April. And I'm going to try to do them in the future. So people check my website, they'll find out what's going on. And if people have any questions about things that they're working on with their writing or their business, they can ask me. But then we'll also just be settling in to do some good work together.
So it's a co-writing space, is that what you said?
That's great.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sophia's links are in the text of this video, and please go read the article because we touched on a lot of things here, but we didn't go into the depth that she goes into in the article, and you'll learn so much more about how to get out of this space if you're feeling you don't have to, like she said, you don't have to feel complete burnout. You may just be feeling unsettled and edgy and a little nudgy, and maybe you're a little, just not sleeping well or just unsettled. That's a sign. That's a sign that something's amiss. So go check that out. And Sophia, as we wrap this up, please share our final words of wisdom for us.
Yeah, I just there's a universe where the things that you're doing could be more fun and they could feel more good. And so let's try to explore that and get curious about what could bring us to that universe.
Wow, what a conversation. There's a universe where things you're doing could actually be fun. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever seen that written in a book. You really need to write about that more, I think.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So, Sophia, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your stories, your strategies with us. I know so many women in our community are going to see themselves in what you shared today. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're watching and want more of Sophia's brilliance, be sure to check out her website at sophiawren.com, join her newsletter, connect with her on social media, and all those links are in the text of this video. Also, check out her free co-writing space, which is also on her website. And let's see what else I want to tell you. If you haven't yet read the full article, please go do that. And you can get that at opwgc.com/magazine. That link is also in the text of this video. So thanks for joining us for more conversations with women living their lives on purpose and making their unique difference on the planet. Please check out our YouTube channel on Purpose Woman Global Community, and that is also in the text of this video. Thanks for watching.